them, Lord, then we can speak about achievement. God, when we have made our people better people, then we have done our job. We pray that your presence will be here right now, and that God, you'll cover everything right now, and that everything will go well. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and we say amen.
Okay, you may now sit. Thank you. Honorable Sir Malwin Joseph, Minister for Health, Wellness, Social Transformation and the Environment, members of Parliament throughout the Eastern Caribbean, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Governor, Deputy Governor, former Deputy Governor, and ECCB officials across the region, senior government officials, executives of banking, finance, health and education, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the executive of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, I warmly welcome you to tonight's event, Transforming Health and Wellness, Use of Traditional Medicines. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce the individual who will lead tonight's proceedings. He's a very familiar face to many of us, Mr. Garfield Burford. Garfield is Director of News, Sports, and Current Affairs at ABS Television Radio Antigua and Barbuda's public broadcaster. He's also one of 2 representatives of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union on the News Committee of the World Broadcasting Unions. Garfield has also completed the Edward R. Morrow Program for Journalists, a flagship initiative under the U.S. State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program. He is renowned and accomplished regional journalist with close to 2.5 decades of experience across all broadcast media platforms. Garfield's life revolves around broadcast news, and his pieces on investigative journalism and key development issues have won critical acclaim, including national awards in his native Jamaica, where he won 2 Journalist of the Year awards in 2005 and 2007, and across the region with recognition from the CBU. His stint with ABS TV Radio follows an illustrious and decorated media career in Jamaica across radio, television, and online platforms, placing him amongst the creme de la creme of regional broadcasters. He has reported on all the major happenings across the region over the past 20 years, including the visit of then U.S. President Barack Obama to Jamaica in 2015, the devastating earthquake in Haiti in 2010, several national elections, as well as high-profile sporting events. Garfield has spearheaded critically acclaimed coverage of key events in Antigua and Barbuda, including the onslaught of Hurricane Irma in 2017, the general elections and referendum in 2018, and the most recent general elections in 2023, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic since 2020. He is immensely pleased that this has contributed to the growing reach and appeal of ABS, with the station now unquestionably the leading broadcaster in the sub-region and among the best in the wider Caribbean. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, and has completed innumerable advanced courses on journalism, including the specific areas of business, finance, and development issues. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Garfield Burford.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me first say thank you so much to the country manager for the Antigua and Barbuda corporate office of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We must say that the Governor General, His Excellency Sir Rodney Williams, would have delighted to have been here, but he had an emergency matter that came up and he was unable to be present. Honorable Sir Malwin Joseph, Minister for Health, Wellness, Social Transformation and the Environment, members of Parliament throughout the Eastern Caribbean, Ambassador Davin Joseph, Chairman of the Medicinal Cannabis Authority, and other members of the Diplomatic Corps, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Deputy Governor, former Deputy Governor, and ECCB officials across the sub-region, including the board member for Antigua and Barbuda, senior government officials, executives of banking, finance, health, and education, panelists, esteemed panelists, specially invited guests. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to you. That doesn't sound healthy and hearty. Very good evening to you. There you go. We're talking about health, right? Health and wellness. So let's try it one last time. Very good evening to everybody. There you go. I like that. Now, you certainly have made a very warm and healthful decision to have been here. Now, we should say that in addition to our audience here, about 60 individuals, just over 60, who are physically with us at the event at the Tradewinds Hotel. And by the way, we should congratulate Tradewinds, because just coming up the stairs and looking to your left out of the wonderful scenery, that just by itself made you feel healthy, right? Congratulations to Tradewinds on a fantastic venue and making this room fantastic for our event. In addition to, of course, yourselves here, there's the audience on ABS Radio 90.5 FM here in Antigua and Barbuda, as well as on the national radio stations throughout the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. So let's hear it for our radio audience. A round of applause for them, please. We're also streaming on other platforms, and to my immediate left, the gentlemen who are ensuring that we are streaming crystal clear throughout the Currency Union and beyond. We should also say a special welcome as well to ECCB Connect's Facebook page, Twitter page, or YouTube channel, and a warm welcome to those who are joining on these platforms as well. Please make them feel healthy and welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, here and in Radioland and who are joining us virtually, this is a most august occasion in March, as the celebrations march on marking the Eastern... Never mind. As the celebrations march on marking the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank at 40. A round of applause for the ECCB at 40, because a tremendous journey. And you would have seen it from, of course, the anniversary reel just before we started. So this is the second stop in the lecture series of the ECCB at 40. Anguilla's lecture last month focused on the blue and green economy. The Antigua and Barbuda edition this evening is focused on the silver economy. And you might be asking, what is the silver economy? Why is there silver all around? Why is there a silver theme? That's because the silver economy, that includes all those economic activities, products, and services designed to meet the needs of people over 50. So don't leave the room because you're not over 50 yet, okay? Even if we're not there, we're getting there. It was Betty Friedan who said, aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength. And since this lecture is about banking, the ECCB, and the tremendous role that it's playing across the sub-region, this quote is priceless from William Holden. He said, quote, aging is an inevitable process. I surely wouldn't want to grow younger. The older you become, the more you know, your bank account of knowledge is much richer. Wouldn't you agree? Right, Sir Marlene? Bank account of knowledge is much richer. So, ladies and gentlemen, this lecture is entitled Transforming Health and Wellness, Use of Traditional Medicines, Silver Economy. And by the way, there's an app for everything, as you know, these days. And just like, there's an app for everything, there's also a color or metal describing pretty much all the economic activities that we are engaged in. So yes, there's a silver economy. And of course, there's a blue and green economy. There's also the yellow economy, the golden economy, all these other economies. And by the way, there is also the yellow economy, which will be the focus of another ECCB lecture coming up, so you can stay tuned for that as well. And just as though there's an app for everything, and there's a color or metal for everything in terms of the economy, growing up in the Caribbean, you would know this, that there is a herb, a leaf, a bush, a seed, a flower, a root, a bark, a resin, or something of a plant that is good for something. Wouldn't you agree? You've heard this. I mean, you say, take this particular bush, take this particular leaf. So that's what we're talking about this evening, ladies and gentlemen. How much should we view these, how much should we How should we view these traditional medicines in the context of modern medicine? What is the place of these traditional medicines in the silver economy? And since we're talking about the silver economy and the value of the silver economy around the world, $15 trillion was what the silver economy was seen to have been valued at in 2020. $15 trillion. So, of course, as you know, many countries have aging populations. People are living longer, they're aging better in most cases. They're having fewer children, so most people are having, as I said, an aging population. So this economy, the silver economy, is significantly crucial to what we do. So we have to get a handle on this silver economy. So ladies and gentlemen, we're having a fair and balanced discussion this evening. We'll get you to ask your questions a bit later on, interact with our panelists. They are all eager to make their presentations to you this evening. The questions will be both from the audience. There's a microphone there. For those who are in the front, we'll take this microphone to you, and so that you can ask your questions and interact with the panelists. So shortly you'll be hearing from our panelists, who is, they're made up of a pharmacist, a general practitioner, and a nutrition consultant. Wow, fantastic. I need you to give our panelists a round of applause. I'm going to get to them later, but just the breadth of knowledge and experience that they come with, absolutely fantastic. A little bit cheating on this because I would have had a sense of what they were going to be presenting. It's going to be huge, huge. Anyway, but first though, I want you to please pay rapt attention to the screen for a message from the Deputy Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Dr. Valda Henry. Please take a look.
Good evening, Your Excellency, Sir Rodney Williams, Governor General of Antigua and Barbuda, and Lady Williams. Honorable Gaston Brown, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Antigua and Barbuda, and also a member of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and his wife, Honorable Maria Bird Brown, Minister of Housing, Works and Urban Renewal. Honorable Maureen Joseph, Minister of Health, and Mrs. Joseph. All other cabinet members, all invited guests, Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, all other members of staff of the bank, in particular, our country manager, Mrs. Carol Ford Harrigan, and her assistant, Mrs. Mary Jean Prime. To you, the general public, good evening. Antigua and Barbuda, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, here we are, bringing to you the second edition of the lecture series of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank 40th anniversary, ECCB at 40, a year of reflection, celebration, and implementation. The Antigua edition, the topic is Transforming Health and Wellness, Use of Traditional Medicine. And our free panelists and our moderator going to guide this discussion. A special welcome to them. We know that NCDs make up more than 60% of the deaths in our region, caused by cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, strokes. That's really too much. The Minister of Health, Mr. Joseph of Antigua and Barbuda, has been dubbed as the Caribbean NCD champion who walks the talk. And you will note that last year, Antigua and Barbuda, I believe this is the first in our ECCU region, installed a blood pressure kiosk so that persons can go and check their blood pressure every day. Because blood pressure, high blood pressure, has been deemed to be the leading cause of these NCDs. Honorable Malwin says wherever he sees challenges, he sees opportunities. And our topic this evening, transforming our health and wellness, is about finding opportunities to deal with the challenges. Prime Minister Gaston Brown has said that he's not concerned so much or only about the money spent to deal with NCDs, and we know it runs in millions of dollars a year in each of our 8 member countries. He's concerned about the loss of productivity, about the loss of the inability of young persons in particular to be their best and to give of their best, because NCDs do not just kill, NCDs disable. And that is a cost for the individual. And as our panelists discuss the topic this evening, I'm sure they will embrace and they will touch on all of the elements of health and wellness: physical, emotional, intellectual, financial, and spiritual. They will talk about the use of traditional medicine, which is sending us back to our roots. You know, in our first edition in Anguilla, our topic was about food security. That too will be covered here. Terms of growing what we eat and eating what we grow to enable and to strengthen our health and also our wellness. The importance of physical activity, exercise. A walk a day, 30 minutes is enough. If you can do more, even greater. As you sit back to take in this lecture, I want you to have some form to record this lecture. Your notepad, your pen, your electronic devices. I want you to not just take notes and leave them there. I want you to apply the strategies that will be discussed tonight to enhance your own health and wellness for yourself, but importantly, for your families. A healthy and a well nation is critical to enhancing our growth trajectory. Let us all be in. The question is, are you in for this big push that Governor Antoine outlined on January 19th, 2023, when we launched our celebration of our ECCB at 40, our year of reflection, celebration, and implementation? Thank you and welcome.
The Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Let me apologize for the absence of the Governor General, who would have so loved to have been here but was unable to. Also apologies for the absence of the Prime Minister, who was also unable to be here, would have loved to have been here as well. Encomiums there for Sir Malwyn Joseph from Dr. Valda Henry, Sir Malwyn, Minister for Health, Wellness, as well as Social Transformation and the Environment. And let me also include in our protocols a warm welcome to Professor Denzel Williams, who is the Principal and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies 5 Islands campus. Welcome, Professor. So, thank you. The Central Bank, by the way, should be again applauded for being at the forefront of cutting-edge discourse on the emerging issues in the currency union and beyond. And they're keeping their pulse not only on the financial health of the sub-region, but also on the health, the physical health of the sub-region, and they should be commended for that. So, time now for our first panelist, ladies and gentlemen. Before I get to our first panelist, I want to share a gem with you from John Lennon about aging and health and wellness. Count your age by your friends, not years. Count your life by smiles, not tears. And here's this other one, absolutely beautiful. Ingrid Bergman, getting old is like climbing a mountain. You get a little out of breath, but the view is much better. I mean, just like looking, for example, the stair left when you were coming up the stairs, right? Absolutely breathtaking. Picture perfect. So on that note, we welcome our first panelist, who is Dr. Petra Miller. Let me just tell you a little bit about Dr. Petra Miller. Dr. Petra Miller has been a medical doctor for 21 years and is the owner of Miller Medical Services private care facility. She graduated from the University of the West Indies with a bachelor's degree with honors in biochemistry and zoology. She also holds a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery degree from the University of the West Indies Mona campus. Dr. Miller has also extensive skills in biochemistry and in applied natural sciences, in which she holds a bachelor's degree with honors, and participated in university studies and independent research projects in biotechnology during her training. Dr. Miller has worked in both laboratory research medicine as well as the clinical medicine, caring for patients with chronic and acute illnesses. Here in Antigua, she has a background of 16 years of government service in clinical care at the health centers and then in the Department of Anatomical Pathology. She has recently opened a private medical care facility where she practices general family medicine. She believes that medicine and the aspects of practicing medicine has an important role in changing the world, not only from a health point of view, but economically, as a country's health is its wealth. To this end, Dr. Miller has invested time and care into health education and promotion during the years of her practice in government service and now in private care, with a goal to one day instill transformative thinking in healthcare for the overall good of the Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome to the podium Dr. Petra Miller to be our first panelist this evening as we are talking about transforming health and wellness. Dr. Miller, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and my honor to speak on behalf of the medical fraternity on the topic of transforming health and wellness through the use of traditional medicine. This evening's talk is going to be a whirlwind through a very, very pointed and very interesting and new topic, as it is the focus has been on a mixed kind of medicine in our last 2 to 3 years since the pandemic. So in terms of traditional medicine, the definition of traditional medicine according to the World Health Organization is the sum total of knowledge, skills, and practices based on the theories, beliefs, and experiences of our indigenous different cultures. So this is what we would call old-time medicine or remedies. Traditional medicine will be our focus throughout the 3 talks this evening, and my role tonight will be to outline the significance of traditional medicine as it influences the practices of medicine today, and also to make an impact on not just the regional economy, but how it has made an impact in the world economy. And we will go through, provide you with information, and hopefully leave you asking yourself, what is most important? Should we be leaning towards traditional, or should we be leaning towards modern medicine? Or hopefully, if I have my way, I will have all of us believing in a happy balance where we can have a holistic type of medicine where both traditional and modern medicine work together for the betterment of not just our patients, but also for our region. So firstly, I'd like to just go through some history of traditional medicine, because I know that people have the concept that traditional medicine is completely separate from modern medicine, and I would like to dispel this concept. In terms of historical significance, we are aware that historically, medicine in its ancient form has been documented as a practice for over 5,000 years from the Sumerians, and it has been well established that there has been medicinal use of plants and herbs in ancient Egypt as far back as 1552 BC, some of which are still the same plants and herbs that we use today. Even the Old Testament mentions herbs as use and medicines and liniments. So the first Chinese herbal medicines were actually documented from the Han Dynasty, and a lot of the traditional medicines that people are bringing into light now are based upon these principles. Even early Greek compilers of existing traditional medicine principles go far as far back as Pythagoras, the mathematician, and the philosophers Aristotle and Hippocrates. In the 17th century, as we come closer to modern medicine, we have to acknowledge the role of the Western Native Americans in formulating healing methods, not just in medicine, but in therapies. Not just in therapies, but also in interventive methods to cure diseases such as scurvy, syphilis, and even non-communicable diseases such as goiters, which they found roots and herbs to cure at that time. Now, what are we really talking about in our region when we talk about traditional medicine? We're talking about a cultural belief. So traditional medicine, as much as our diet, as much as our eating pattern, is a cultural belief. The practice of traditional medicine is usually passed down verbally through generations. But much like our culture of eating or our culture of having a festival, we have a culture of medical beliefs and we have a culture of medical systems. Now, the principles are centered around the resources and the natural plants and fauna and animals that are available to us in our region. And every Caribbean person knows or is well aware of what their mother used to do when you had a fever, or what you used to do when you have a belly ache. And we are all aware of the healing powers of alcalado, as well as bush tea. So these things are not to be taken lightly. It would be remiss of me not to mention our African heritage, because a lot of our medicinal practices actually come from, Africa. And the African and Asian influence in our lives is not just in the way we look, speak, and eat, but also in our primary health care. Today in Africa and in Asia, over 80% of their communicable disease prevention is rooted in traditional medicine. When adopted outside of its regions, traditional medicine is sometimes called alternative medicine in the Western world, but we are Caribbean people, and so it's not really alternate to us, as it is a part of our culture. So for Antiguans and Caribbean people, I would like us to see if we can think of a list of traditional medicines that actually work, that maybe never came to light as absolute methods. For instance, I mentioned it before, bush tea. Bush tea actually has chemical properties that does act as an antipyretic agent, so it does relieve fever, and it does relieve a lot of ailments. Nutmeg and garlic. Soursop and lime leaf has properties that kills infestations of parasites. And aloe vera is a well-known remedy, now being marketed for skin purposes. And soft candle. I know up until yesterday when I phoned the pharmacy, soft candle is still available and it still works. So, also we disregard the simple things like cumin and coriander in the curries that we eat. So I wanted us to just take a sojourn, a quick look at some of these remedies in detail, because I'm speaking about them in a very parochial manner, but it is a very scientific and documented thing that hibiscus tea has been used in many countries. I know that Asia takes a lot of the praise for it, but we use hibiscus tea here, and it does lower your blood pressure. There have been many studies that shows that hibiscus tea has an ACE inhibitor, which actually lowers your systolic pressure by 11.7%. Now the question is how useful it could be over time. What is the dosage that could benefit our people? What is the frequency of dosing? And what are the interactions that would occur if we as doctors would start to encourage our patients or empower them with the knowledge that these items that we take for old-time remedies are actually helpful. So we would first have to equip ourselves with the knowledge and the training to understand which one is appropriate when, how much of it, and in what setting. in terms of there's so many natural remedies available in the Caribbean and available to Antiguans. Ginger is one of my favorites. It provides many health benefits. It decreases cholesterol. It also has a natural blood thinner. And it actually changes your blood cholesterol fraction from bad cholesterol to good cholesterol. And it promotes, or rather, it prevents plaque formation and adherence to vessels. So what does that mean? It basically can help you to avoid blocked arteries. And therefore, in concert with medications, healthy lifestyle, and diet, ginger can also be an adjunct to good health. So it is whether or not we equip ourselves and our patients with this information. You can also acknowledge garlic and honey. I don't know about the attendees here tonight, but I think my mother used garlic and honey not just for the common cold, but she used honey for burns. And it turns out that honey is a natural antibiotic. It's used in ointments. And garlic itself is a bacteriostatic agent, and it has many properties which are endless and would have its own presentation. But some of the properties include also preventing atherosclerosis, also acting as an anticoagulant, so that you can use this as an adjunct when preventing myocardial infarctions or the common heart attack. I had mentioned coriander and cumin before, and in our setting, we commonly see these being used in curries, and coriander is not to be taken lightly, as it is a very, very, very potent anti-inflammatory agent and is being used to treat cystitis, which is inflammation of the bladder. Turmeric now is all the rage, and people have now begun to acknowledge the power of turmeric since the pandemic, because if we recall, the pandemic forced us to not be able to take modern medicines and instead to use natural remedies to boost our immunity. Turmeric was used traditionally in the West Indies to close wounds at one point, and now it is used to minimize inflammation, to maximize healing, and it is readily available locally and also in every curry that you have. I think that this is my last example, and it would be remiss of me to leave out chocolate, because in the South, people do not acknowledge the contribution of our southern islands to the world chocolate production. And so dark chocolate is filled with flavonoids and chemicals that can avoid heart attack, that can lower your pressure. And it is, however, short-lived. So therefore, the duration of action is the problem with some of these natural remedies. Now, I would like us to discuss, if you will, traditional medicines that have now become mainstream, including vinegar washes, hibiscus tea, turmeric and ginger supplementation, green tea extract, cranberry, and what is the role in modern medicine? Well, first of all, let's talk about what is modern medicine. Modern medicine was just invented through, as we said, through time. We had to standardize our principles. We had to do research, and we had to make sure that doses were correct for symptoms. We had to make sure that there was some amount of calculation of duration of action, so we know how often to dose our patients. And then most importantly, we had to find out if there were side effects, because nothing good comes without side effects. And so therefore you have to balance according to dosing and testing and years of research. You have to balance your good effects with your side effects. So therefore, what we basically did to develop modern medicine was just to develop dosing. It is no different from traditional medicine, except that now we have it in different modalities. We have standard medications of standard doses with known side effects in different modalities, in tablets, in liquid, in IV, in IM, and so on. I see a lot of raised eyebrows, but I'm going to show you that there are lots of medications that people do not recognize as being derived from natural medicines. Morphine and codeine, Panadine F are all derived from the poppy plant. Digoxin, which is a medication for heart failure, is derived from this beautiful purple flower called the Digitalis purpurea. And penicillin was the first antibiotic to be discovered, was found accidentally in a petri dish. So basically, there are lots of applications of traditional medicines that we do not recognize as traditional medicines. One of my pet subjects is speaking about the fact that most chemotherapy agents are based in traditional medicine, because one of the most useful and penetrant chemotherapy agents is called vinblastine and the vincristine family. They are derived from the purple periwinkle of Madagascar, which, if you look at this flower, I'm sure you drive past it on the road all the time. And I'm sure you did not know that the chemotherapy that we use to treat leukemia is derived from this purple flower. Also, did you know that Taxol, which is the medication that we use to treat breast cancer currently in Antigua and in the world, is derived from a relative of the aloe plant? There are so many examples of traditional medicine that has been standardized for modern medicine. And now we have to also look backwards into the past. Are we neglecting our useful traditional medicine remedies? Can they be helpful in abating the burden of the non-communicable disease on our community? I think so. The question I ask is, what is the real difference? The only difference is standardization, dosing, duration, and interactions. And so therefore, for those doctors who, like myself, would like to incorporate traditional medicines into their regular routine of treating patients, you have to do your research. You have to know what is available. You have to know what dose to give. You have to know what to recommend. So let us talk about non-communicable diseases, especially in our silver economy. Chronic diseases in the over 50 population in the Caribbean is at an all-time high. The general population right now has a 20 to 38% rate of hypertension and diabetes. People over 60 who have hypertension, diabetes, or both are projected to represent 60% of our population within the next 20 years. This is based on research that was released by the University of the West Indies at a recent talk where the Vice Chancellor, Mr. Hilary Beckles, made an alarm at the fact that our over 60 population, up to 60% of them, will have hypertension, diabetes, or both within the next 20 years. And that is a reality that we need to face. Chronic disease management will become a critical crisis. Hypertension and its related complications represent over 60% of deaths from non-communicable diseases in our region, not just in our fair Antigua and Barbuda. And a balance of traditional and modern medicine would make an impact on these diseases. So let's talk about the economics of the situation. No, by no means am I an economist, but I would like to just point out some simple principles that I myself learned while doing my research. And there are a couple of things. One, I think that Mr. Garfield mentioned a couple of these, and I would like to just repeat them for impact. The cost and the management of non-communicable disease makes a big impact on our economy, not just in Antigua, but as a region. The cost of medications provided by the governments in the regions is over in the millions. And the cost of sick leave and the loss of productivity bears an immeasurable cost on our society. And the cost of the sequelae, and when I speak about the sequelae, I mean the sequelae of hypertension being heart attacks, strokes, and the debilitating complications thereafter, peripheral vascular disease, and inability to walk, and inability to work, and the sequelae of diabetes, not only being the dependence on medication, but the illness that it imparts upon the patients, and also the possibility of amputations, and the fact that the amputation rate in the Caribbean is much higher than most places in the world. These are the real economic burdens that we have to face about non-communicable diseases. So is there a balance? And is a balance the answer to what we can do? And I believe so. I believe that herbal medicine, because it became a vital part of boosting immunity in the world because of the COVID-19 pandemic, what we do not realize is that it has opened our eyes to the possibility of approaching medicine not only from prescription and advice, but also from a holistic life advice kind of style. But more importantly, the fact that medicines, including turmeric, garlic, and herbs, they increased your immunity during the pandemic, but they can also increase your likelihood of surviving and doing well and decreasing your morbidity due to non-communicable diseases. And on a most interesting note, 10 to 15% of the developed world now uses daily supplementation of these herbal remedies. So let's talk briefly about the growth of the herbal medicine market. It was an interesting fact to note that according to a study done by the Business Insight, the Fortune Business Insight, that the herbal medicine market size was $151 billion US in 2020. And this was due to the demands of the pandemic, which they thought would decrease. But however, this has remained steady and continued to climb. And the global herbal medicine market is projected to grow to $165 billion from $165 billion to $347.5 billion between last year and 2029. And so therefore, it is a possibility that it's not just for us to gain from good health, but also to gain from economic gain, because we have plants available which could be marketed not only to our own people, but to people outside of our region. So the aloe that you pass, the periwinkle on the side of the road, the bush tea that we take for light in the mornings, all of these things have an impact, and they have a health impact and an economic impact in our world. This is just a pictorial representation of the expected growth of the market over time. And most importantly, this evening I'd like us to understand that the three panelists are going to come together and explain how we can increase our health or transform our health through not traditional medicine. So I leave you this evening with the thought that traditional medicine and modern medicine just need to be balanced for us to have the key to a healthy future. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for Dr. Petra Miller. I think, Dr. Miller, perhaps I could telepathically hear some of the questions already for when we start the question and answer session. I think one of the questions I heard telepathically from the audience was, which bush to drink for the bush tea, and why are we not growing more periwinkle and aloe vera and that kind of thing to sell? But anyway, we're going to get to which bush it is that we're going to grow, right? And which bush we're going to drink. All right, so that was our first panelist. Dr. Miller opened the batting and did fantastically well. The West Indies would have a lot to learn from her as well on that. All right, so you've heard from, as I said, the general practitioner on our panel. I know you're eager to ask questions, but of course, that's later on. After we have all the panelists, then we'll be able to ask questions, both from those in the physical audience as well as those online and on radio. All right, so then we go to our second panelist, and this is Mrs. Yvelle Charles Jenkins. I'll tell you a little bit about Mrs. Charles Jenkins before I exit so that she can make her presentation. Mrs. Yvelle Charles Jenkins graduated from the University of Santa Clara, Cuba, as the most integral student and went on to pursue her MBA with merit at the University of Leicester in the UK. She has completed several diploma and certificate courses, which include drug supply management with the University of Limpopo, South Africa, project management facilitated by the UE Open Campus, Antigua, graduating as top student, financial management with Cornell University, New York, and blended learning design with the Commonwealth of Learning. Mrs. Yvelle Charles Jenkins has worked extensively in the field of health and pharmacy within the islands of Cuba, St. Lucia, and here in Antigua and Barbuda. Her work has included studying the therapeutic benefits of the Morinda citrifolia, which is noni, the noni plant. We're going to talk a lot about noni from her presentation, as well as evaluating strategies for marketing behavioral change in healthcare. By the way, there's a quick aside here. Noni was a big thing a few years ago. Kind of fallen off, right? Still is a big thing, but haven't heard as much about noni as I used to hear probably about 15 years ago or so. But anyway, she's going to tell you about it. Mrs. Yvelle Charles Jenkins is currently employed as a senior pharmacist with the Antigua Barbuda Central Medical Procurement Unit Medical Benefit Scheme. She also works part-time as a facilitator at the School of Pharmacy at the Antigua State College, the ASC, her focus being pharmacy management, dispensing, and pharmaceutical compounding. Mrs. Jenkins has also had an interest in wellness as well. To this end, she has been a presenter with the Medical Benefits Scheme's Take Charge of Your Diabetes educational program and is a contributor to her community newsletter. Yvelle is a member of the Antigua and Barbuda Council on Sustainable Development, Antigua's first think tank. She was also a member of the original planning team that successfully hosted the very first TEDx Antigua. So, with all that said, a warm welcome to our second panelist, Mrs. Yvelle Charles Jenkins, pharmacist, to talk about noni and other products.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buford, for that introduction. Please allow me to adopt all previously established protocol. Now, before I continue, let me open with the disclaimer that I do not belong to any pharmaceutical, or I'm not affiliated with any pharmaceutical industry or a pharmaceutical company. And when I use the word drug, it is purely in the legal sense. So please do not call the police for me. As Dr. Miller has already established, traditional medicines are basically, if we want to speak of a general, very basic definition, are traditions that have been handed down from generation to generation. And these have been used to treat ailments. So this is basically what traditional medicine is, if we skip all of the jargon. Now, I know because I'm coming from pharmacy, I may have a tendency to incorporate a lot of jargon, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible so that everybody can follow with me. So let's take a trip with me, going around the world. Everybody has their bags packed. We're visiting the Orient. We're visiting the Middle East. We're visiting Egypt and the Greeks. We are also visiting India. And of course, we're visiting Africa. Now, what is common to all of these images? All of these images show different cultures using traditional medicine to heal some kind of ailment. Okay, we even saw in the Greeks and the Egyptians, we saw their documentation of what traditional medicines they've been using throughout their culture. Now, I want you to take a minute and look at this slide and what it shows. Let me go back because I went a little bit too fast. And this slide shows all of the major outbreaks that we've experienced from AD 165 until our recent tango with the coronavirus in 2019. And what this slide tells us is that throughout our lifetime and even lifetimes before us, populations are always plagued with disease. And if populations are plagued with disease, what do we need? We need a way to treat those diseases. Even our dog, Cujo, this is Cujo, and even Cujo knows that traditional medicines have a place in life for treating ailments. I'm sure you've seen your dogs or your cats eating grass when they've eaten something that makes them feel uncomfortable or unwell. Now, I'm not telling you to go eat grass. I am just telling you that even in our natural instincts, there is a natural tendency to use traditional medicine or to use herbal medicine. Now, as Dr. Miller said, we've seen a shift to modern medicine. And why have we seen that shift to modern medicine? Well, Dr. Miller mentioned a few of the challenges. Over time, we've had challenges with dosing. I know you remember your grandmother telling you the more bitter, the better. Yeah? We've had challenges with the taste of the medication. We have had challenges with identifying plants. Now, ideally, if we called the plant by name and it would answer, everything would be fine. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And what happens sometimes is that some of the plants may look identical to others, and because of how we interpret or our perception of things, we may find that we are mistaking one plant for another. Another challenge that we've had was poor access to research, and that was back in the times. And so we see a shift to modern medicine because, one, there is economic benefit, and like Dr. Miller explained, industries were created with the purpose of purchasing medicine, right? So this takes us to the drug development process. What is the drug development process? Essentially, we have 5 little circles, and it looks like a very short process. But what it is really is millions of dollars and many, many years to get just a few tablets or a few new medicines. Now, we want to pay attention to the first part of the drug development process, and that is the discovery and development section of that process. And what happens here? Just like the name says, we discover compounds and we develop compounds. But where do we get these compounds from? And who does that discovery and developing? And that takes us to pharmacy. Now, when you think of pharmacy, I'm sure the first image that comes to mind, I'm not wearing one today, but it's someone in a white coat in a hospital setting or in your private community pharmacy, right? However, drug discovery and development links to different fields of pharmacy. One of the more common or the more popular or the most important fields would be pharmacognosy. And pharmacognosy, what it does is that it deals with the different compounds that form plant medicine. So it helps to identify the compounds and to extract the compounds. And what do we do with these compounds? Now, over time, plants have evolved to defend themselves. Plants have evolved to fight parasites. Plants have evolved to fight disease, because, I mean, nobody else is going to fight for the plant, and the plant has to fight for itself. And what we've realized is that plants have what we call secondary metabolites. And the role of the secondary metabolites in the plant is really to fight disease and help the plant to persist and to exist and to survive. And guess what? We in pharmacy are using these same secondary metabolites and these same compounds to create modern medicines. And guess where these compounds are coming from? From our traditional plants, right? Now, this slide just shows well, not all of it, but a large section of the secondary metabolites that are possible or that can possibly be obtained from plants. And of course, in addition to what Dr. Miller said when she presented on the different plants, the different modern medicines that come directly from plants, I want to just add to you our favorite product, aspirin. Aspirin comes from the bark of the willow tree. Weeping willow, there we have it, aspirin. Now, the Federal Drug Administration is responsible for approving all drugs, all modern medicine, let me say that, right? And this chart simply shows that over the last 30 to 40 years, the number of antibacterial medicines that were approved by the FDA If you look at the greens and the blues, these all have natural origin. And when we say natural origin, we're speaking plants, animal, marine sources. And that these are your antibacterials that were approved in the last 30 to 40 years. So, if modern medicine is so fantastic and so good, I mean, modern medicine, we can all agree that modern medicine has its place and it is a wonderful thing, right? Does traditional medicine still have a role in our society? You're not sure? I didn't see anybody nod their heads. The World Health Organization estimates that over 65% of the world's population still uses solely botanical productions to treat ailments. And that's right. The world's population, over 65% of them, are treating ailments with only plants. No modern medicine, just plants. Now, it can be that there is a lack of access. It can be that there is a lack of, or they're located remotely, or it can be that they're financially incapable of accessing the modern medicine. But what remains is that we still have a very large segment of our population who rely solely on botanical plants for medicine. And they're still here. So, does traditional medicine still have a place with us? If we think back to the last few years, we realize that we did experience the pandemic, and one of the things that we experienced with the pandemic was that there was a shortage or there was a disruption in the supply chain. And that did not only affect our toilet paper, right? A lot of the shelves were not able, a lot of the pharmacies were not able to stock our regular medicines. We even have issues right now where we're experiencing shortages in things like amoxil, and amoxil is a very common antibiotic that's used regularly, especially here in the Caribbean. And we're experiencing shortages with amoxil, we're experiencing shortages with cough syrups. And what's happening now is that the FDA has had to release statements to allow compounding pharmacies to create amoxil suspensions because they are not available as modern medicine or as packaged on the shelf. What else? Well, we've seen the cost of developing drugs. What about the traditional medicine being a more cost-effective method for some of our segments of our population? Some people just cannot afford the modern medicine. We also see poor prescribing patterns, and I see some of our doctors in here. We also see poor prescribing patterns and poor use of medication, leading to an increase in resistance. So what's happening now? Our germs are getting stronger because they've gotten accustomed to what we're throwing at them. And guess what the pharmaceutical companies are doing? We're going back to traditional medicine to see what's available that we can use to fight these same germs. It also helps to maintain our culture and our tradition. And I think if I were to poll the room and ask if you have a sore throat, what would be your first choice? The more senior population would make some garlic, lime, and honey, and the younger population would pick up some lozenges in a pharmacy. And that shows a gap between our generation and the handing down of our tradition. Dr. Miller highlighted the opportunities for economic growth and benefits. And I know that this is a financial institution, and so economy is important. We have economies that have created industries out of exporting medicinal plants to European countries. So places like Ghana and China literally export medicinal plants as an industry. And of course, if we try to tie it back to our silver economy, we will be tapping into our senior population, tapping into their knowledge, providing them with products that they're familiar with, providing them with products that they're comfortable with and would be willing to use. It also increases their productivity, their usefulness, as they give back to our society with the knowledge that they have acquired. So, before we continue, Dr. Nanton gave us some examples of what I call supermarket drugs or supermarket medicine, mostly because they're available to you on the shelf and they're labeled, and they're easy to find. But I'm going to take you into the bush, right? Put on your boots because we're going into the bush, all right? Now, I'm looking at each of the ECCB islands and just giving you one example of plants that are used as medicine. And I ask you to bear in mind, of course, that our islands have similar flora and fauna. And so just like how we try to claim, St. Lucians try to claim Sir Arthur Lewis and Antiguans try to claim Sir Arthur Lewis, of course we will be claiming the different plants, okay? So before we go into the plants, let's talk about methods of preparation. And that's one of the things that people tend to have issues with. How do we prepare our traditional medicines? We have infusions, where you just pour the hot water over it. We have decoctions, and of course we have maceration. Now if I were to trade it into local parlance, it would be draw the tea, boil the tea, and grind and soak the leaf and them, okay? So Antigua and Barbuda, first up, we're visiting the islands, taking that Caribbean trip, and we see fever grass or lemongrass. We're in the bush, put on your boots, right? And that is one of the elements of our bush tea. What does it do? It treats fever, it fights inflammation, it's very useful for digestion. And it's also taking over Signal Hill and has to be burnt regularly. Our economists, what are we going to do with that? Anguilla, we have cattle tongue, or as Antiguans say, cattle tongue, right? Useful for cough and cold. And recent studies have shown that if you create an extract of the cattle tongue at a 0.5%, it shows antibacterial properties. So it can fight some very common bacteria like Staph aureus. We see St. Vincent and the kojo root. Of course, we use different parts of the plant, like I said, and this is useful for fighting inflammation. It stimulates your immune system, and that takes us back to what Dr. Miller said, living better. And it also has effects for the symptoms of colds and fevers. Montserrat, the leaf of life. This plant also shows protective effects. So it actually protects your kidneys and it protects your liver. And it is useful for fighting parasites and also for abscesses and wounds. St. Lucia, we have tuatas. And tuatas is a plant that you find out in the countryside. And it has sedative effects, it's digestive effects, and it is also antihypertensive. It helps bring down your blood pressure, it fights digestion, and it helps you to breathe properly if you're having a respiratory problem. St. Kitts and Nevis, the name says it all, the paracetamol plant. What do you think we use that for? Fever, so fever and colds, yeah? Dominica, some of you will remember that from COVID, the vervain or the vervine or the veven if you're speaking Creole. This plant is very good. It has antibacterial properties, and it's useful for boosting milk production for persons who are breastfeeding. And of course, Grenada. I'm sure you recognize this plant. They call it big thyme. Some of us call it French thyme or broadleaf thyme. And it shows lots of antibacterial activity in addition to being a yummy seasoning for our meats and products. It's also useful against coughs and colds, and it is a good antifungal. So let's come out of the bush a little bit and let's go into our backyard. I am sure the majority of us have one of these trees in our backyard. Pawpaw or papaya tree, yes? And what do we do with pawpaw? Well, I know we love to cook it and eat it with fungi, yeah? But in addition to that, pawpaw has been shown to have digestive enzymes that aid in digestion. But even further than that, we're going to look at pawpaw as an element useful for healing wounds, right? So bed sores and the types of wounds that we would have, maybe gapes from your C-sections and so on. So don't worry about all of that. I'm just going to round it off. This is really one study, and there are lots of studies, but of course we don't have time for all of them. So I just pulled out one of them. And what it did, it took a group of people with similar demographics, all right? And they treated half of the people with a regular hydrogen peroxide dressing, and they treated the other half of the people with a green papaya dressing. And what do you think happened? Well, ladies and gentlemen, our green papaya was in the lead. And so the pawpaw dressing cut the healing time of the wound by half. So if you look at Group B represents the pawpaw, and Group A represents the hydrogen peroxide. So we see that the time that it took for the wound to show healing and show proper healing and to almost heal was 2.5 days, plus or minus 1 day. And we see that the hospitalization time was cut by about a week. Now, we may be behind in this here, but other islands in the Caribbean are already employing this. Are we employing it? Yes, and so we're moving forward, yes? And that word, we move on to that word, interactions. And interactions makes everybody quiver. When we say interactions, everybody wants to run in the other directions. I'm sure if I say it now, if I say interaction, everybody will try to head out the door, right? But what we must understand is that everything has interactions, especially in health. So you have interactions with other medicines, you have interactions with food, you have interactions with disease conditions, and of course you have interactions with the herbs. What is important to remember with these interactions? How interactions work. So they can either increase the effect of the drug, they can decrease the effect of the drug, or they can pretend to be the drug and completely nullify the effect, in that they pretend to be it and they just take away all of the effect. There's no effect happening, but the body thinks that the process is occurring as it should. Why is this important? If you're using traditional medicine and you're using modern medicine, then there's a possibility that you might be using compounds that do the same thing. That can be good if you're trying, if it helps, if it goes hand in hand to help bring down the symptom, but it can also be bad if it makes too much of the drugs accumulate in the body and not come out in time, and then you have toxicity. Okay? Now, if I were to go through the list of interactions, whether it be herb and drug interactions or interactions between our very own modern medicines, that would be a very long time, and Mrs. Ford would not be happy with me. But what I did was just to highlight some groups that are more sensitive to experimenting with traditional medicines on their own. Okay, and so we look at groups who use medication that affects the way your blood clots. We look at groups that use medication that will bring your blood sugar down in a very short period of time, and groups that use medications to control seizures. Okay? We're not saying that you can't use it at all, but we're saying that if you must, you need to have a real conversation with your doctor, and you really need to research that and see that if it is an option for you. So what next? What next, my audience? It is important to understand whatever condition it is that you have. You understand it, and you try to understand the medicine that you're using. You don't need to understand all of the pathways, but at least the basics. What is it going to do for you? That insulin will bring my blood sugar down in the next 15 minutes. Okay? And if you have a better understanding of that, and it puts you in a better position to make decisions with respect to your health. You need to be open and transparent with your medical care providers. A lot of people go to the doctors and sit and smile and nod, and then they go home and take the medicines, and they never disclose to the doctor that they're using traditional medicine. All right? Our medical care providers as well need to educate themselves on what is available in our region, how it is traditionally used, and how it can be employed in the patient's treatment. Because guess what? The patient will say, yes, doctor, and the patient will go home and do whatever it is that they please. Less is more. I know you remember your grandmother making that bush tea extra green and extra bushy. All right? If you're not sure of the dosing, we are on the side of caution, and you use less material. And of course, you educate yourself on the herbs that are available to you in your country and in your region. You educate yourself on how they're traditionally used. And that is where our senior population comes in. We take that information from them in our discovery phase, and we build on that. So right now, technology is at its highest, and we can all agree that the internet can be a rabbit hole sometimes, right? But the internet also has very valuable information. And so with that, we try as much as possible to discuss the findings with someone who can help you interpret whatever it is that you have found. We now have catalogs online which actually give you images of the plants and tell you what the plants are used for, where you can find them, and even how to grow them. Okay? With that, these are my references. You've been a wonderful audience. I'd like to say thank you to ECCB Antigua for inviting me to participate in this lecture series. And of course, congratulations to ECCB on your 40th anniversary. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for Mrs. Charles Jenkins, Yvelle Charles Jenkins, making a presentation. But there's one plant we never saw there. Noni. I wasn't thinking Noni, though. Ambassador Joseph, I think you did not see a plant that you wanted to see. Ambassador Joseph, ladies and gentlemen, is the chairman of the Medicinal Cannabis Authority. So we never saw the cannabis plant. We'll get to that in the question and answer. I wonder which island Mrs. Charles Jenkins would claim that. 4 trees? The whole island, okay. 4 trees, more than 4 trees. All right, there you go. All right, so we've come to the time where we have our final panelists. Again, have your questions ready. We'll get to the questions. And again, I'm pretty sure that Sir Malwin and Ambassador Joseph and Professor Williams are already thinking, how can we tap into this $15 trillion industry, the silver economy? What plants can we grow and export? What more can we use to increase and to improve our health care and to cut NCDs? So I'm pretty sure that they're already starting to think of those possibilities. Potentialities are plenty. So our final panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is Mrs. Dorothy Graham Charles. We did say that there we will be talking about nutrition as well, right? So here's our nutritionist. Let me tell you very briefly about her. So Mrs. Dorothy Graham Charles is the nutrition manager of the Medical Benefits Scheme here in Antigua and Barbuda and private consultant at Eat for Success. She's Antigua and Barbuda's country representative for the International Confederation of Dietetic Associations. She's also the immediate past president, actually 2021 to 2023, of the Caribbean Association of Nutritionists and Dietitians, and former country representative for the international affiliate of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Mrs. Charles completed a diploma and a Bachelor of Health Science in Dietetics in Nutrition at the University of Technology in Jamaica with a focus on institutional management and health education. She holds a Master of Science in Nutrition at the University of the West Indies Mona campus and specialized in sports nutrition at the National Association of Sports Nutrition USA. She's currently pursuing additional studies in pharmacy as well as in public health with a focus on epidemiology. Mrs. Charles is certified in several areas including backyard gardening, yay, good stuff, where she has initiated various gardening programs, especially in schools. She's also a guide leader and uses this avenue to help girls develop into future leaders of positive school change or social change. Now for leisure, Mrs. Charles enjoys various activities such as sewing, swimming, and dancing. She toured Spain with the Antigua Dance Academy in 2005 and played the role of Queen in the 2018 Antigua Dance Center Ballet recital of Sleeping Beauty. She is multi-talented and multifaceted. In 2010, she was named Antigua and Barbuda's top female cyclist and participated in the 2022 Dolphins Kick for a Cause half-mile swim. So with that extensive resume, we welcome Mrs. Dorothy Graham Charles, nutrition consultant, of course, as I said, at the Medical Benefits Scheme, to talk with us about from the nutrition side of things. Have her welcome, please.
Thank you, Mr. Burford. Good evening to everyone. A healthy good evening to our face-to-face and virtual audience. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this evening. Acknowledgements to Sir Joseph and to all the executives and leadership of the ECCB. So I get to talk about the fun part of our presentation this evening, nutrition. Why is it fun? Because we eat food every day, don't we all? Let me firstly acknowledge this wonderful lady, Dr. Sylvia Adjoa Mitchell, and she is an expert in medicinal plant research. I view her as an elder in the field of botany and medicinal plants. Acknowledgements also to our indigenous knowledge that is often uncelebrated and uncompensated. And I'm going to talk about that later down in the presentation. In this presentation, I will start with some of the core aspects foundational to our health. Then I'll move on to the primary and secondary metabolites. Just a quick review. Mrs. Jenkins provided that information for you earlier. And followed by the colors of health and the collective benefits of these colors. And lastly, how all the concepts translate into our silver economy. Now, there are some terms that we hear from time to time, and these terms all aim to express natural medicine. And so as we go through the presentations and as you hear these terms used, you will understand that we all are trying to express the same thing in different ways, maybe slightly different meanings, but with all the same sentiment. So keep these terms in mind. The World Health Organization defines health as not only the absence of disease and infirmity, but also the complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So what does that mean? If you say you're healthy, but mentally you're not there, socially relationships are not working out, then we still have some issues to deal with, don't we all? That's correct. So it has to be a holistic approach. So let's talk about the chronic diseases and how to address these via multifactorial approaches. Of course, addressing the health issues associated with the westernized and sedentary lifestyles, environmental pollution, and toxicity. At this point, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. There is an addictions crisis, not necessarily to narcotics, but to ultra-processed food, keeping in mind that sugar is not the only ultra-processed food. And so we could talk until the cows come home. We can encourage our young people. We can encourage the public to eat healthily. But if that nut in the brain, that little section of the brain, does not have that desire to eat healthy foods, then we have to deal with that issue. The behavioral issue that is causing people to have the desire for foods that are unhealthy, even though they want to be healthy, but the cravings are there. And we really need to address these. And so we also need to address now the foundations of health. And there are various models used to illustrate the pillars of health. For ease of reference, I use these 6 S's to help us remember what some of these pillars are. So sleep is important. We can't defy sleep. We can go for days without food, maybe even water without exercising, but sleep. Anyone who says that they have gone for days without sleep and they're still functional, that's not true. They're not functional. And actually, research has shown that without sleep, without proper sleep, without quality sleep, cheating sleep actually affects our cognitive function. The next thing is stress management, and this is something we don't really teach much in schools: financial management, stress management, nutrition. These are some gaps in our education system, not necessarily that they're not spoken about, but to the detail where somebody who graduates from school can function, can be able to relate, can be able to survive in this society with all the stressors that are evolving and growing as industrialization, globalization, commercialization. These actually help to compound the problem. Yes, they have their benefits, but then we have to look at the other aspects of our lives that are affected by these stressors. Then sports. Sports is also important. When I say sports, I'm not just talking about us exercising, doing our 15 to 30 minutes a day. I'm talking about recreational aspects of our lives, spending time with our children, playing with them, doing games, as we mentioned earlier, swimming, getting out into the sun, sea and sand. These are all important to our development. Now we're talking about traditional medicine. How do all of these tie in with what we are presenting this evening? The first thing is, if we are not addressing the foundations of health, then we could take all the herbal medicine there is and still not see results. Does that make sense? So, for example, let us talk about something real, simple, and common to all of us: our bowel habits. So if we're not consuming sufficient water, if we're not consuming sufficient fiber, if we are not going to the loo or the John when nature calls, then what we're doing here is an injustice to our natural and normal body function. So what happens then? Persons who do not answer to the call on a regular basis, they are training their system, they are training their bowels not to be functional as it should. So what happens? They mix up some senna, they mix up some aloes, they mix up whatever that they know, and maybe some herbal tea in the supermarket, and they drink that consistently to become more regular, while ignoring the natural, ancient ways of doing things. So we must first look at the foundations of our health, and we must address them before we even talk about treating any disorders that we may face. So this infographic here, what it says is, it's important to establish the root cause and how to treat these issues. Okay, you're going to the bank for a loan, you're not saving any money, you're not financially responsible. Obviously, they're not really going to consider you, right? Or even if they consider you, then there are going to be repercussions to that. So same thing with our health. If we align it to money, liken it to money and investment, if we are investing in our health the right way, then when we take the herbal medicines, it's only to enhance our lives and address issues that our daily habits are not able to at a particular point in time. Now I'd like to point to these two wonderful persons. Do you know them? Calypso Rose and Dr. Sanjay Gupta. What do they have in common? So Calypso Rose survived 2 episodes of cancer, and she attributed her recovery to God and juicing. I had the distinguished pleasure to attend a conference, a food and nutrition conference, where Dr. Gupta presented, and he highlighted the importance of Ayurveda spices as a key to living longer, healthier lives. So we all have been doing these things, right? We've been putting our nutmeg in the porridge. We've been adding the aniseed, garlic, onion to our cooked foods. We've been making various dishes in the kitchen that have therapeutic benefits to us. And I just want to encourage us to continue to do so. So let's talk about the plant metabolites. And Mrs. Jenkins spoke briefly to those. And what I'd like to do is expand on the plant metabolites in terms of the primary and the secondary. But what is important to note is that the metabolites do also come from fungal, animal, and marine and geographical resources. So for example, we know fungus, right? All right, they may not classify it as a plant per se or as a flower, so it's fungus is a fungus. Okay, that's right. So, but animal sources, for example, can you give me an animal source of a metabolite? Like, what about fish oil? Cod liver oil, krill oil, we know about those, right? Well, that's a marine source, and an animal source would be like lanolin from the sheep, okay, that they put in the lotions, so forth, so on. So keep in mind that the traditional medicines are not only consumed orally, but they are used topically and through other routes of administration. Geographical resources would speak to, for example, seawater, where we get iodine, calcium from rocks, minerals from the spring or the river. So there are other sources of these metabolites. But we are speaking about the plant metabolites today more specifically. So the primary metabolites, we do get carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and organic acids like acetic acid, so forth, so on, in vinegar, right? And then these are affiliated with the direct growth and development and reproduction of the plant source, and by extension, human beings. Then the secondary metabolites, like the alkaloids, like cocaine, the sterols, essential oils, and lignins, these all do not necessarily relate to the direct growth and development and reproduction. However, they relate to the defense purposes of the plant. So for example, the color, the smell, the flavor, it has antibiotic and other medicinal properties. So what does that mean? When we do our companion planting, okay? When we're planting in the garden, we don't want to use pesticides and herbicides, so we plant one fruit beside the other, one vegetable beside the other, in order to repel pests so that we have a healthy garden and we do have good crop yield. You saw this diagram before, and you can pull out from this diagram some metabolites such as flavonoids, tannic acids, lycopene. So we have classes and subclasses used interchangeably to explain or express or to define the metabolites that we eat daily in our foods. So let us talk more specifically about some of the beneficial metabolites, which we call phytochemicals. And are you familiar with that term? Yes. So the phytochemicals, they come in 4 different classes. You know about the carotenoids, like beta carotene. You know about the phenolic compounds. You know about the alkaloids, as we explained. So they are healthy and maybe toxic phytochemicals, but we're talking about the healthy ones here on. It's scary to hear your own voice sometimes, isn't it? So now we're going to talk about the plant parts. And what we need to note is that you could have a plant, but the different parts of the plant can have different properties. So for example, carrot, the vegetable itself contains beta carotene, so it's rich in beta carotene. But the carrot greens, which you know we can eat, right? We can put it in soups, we can cut it up and blend it into juice. Yes, we can. We can eat beet greens as well. So a lot of things we're throwing away, right? We're talking about the silver economy. So this is an opportunity for us to familiarize ourselves with some of the plant parts and those that we can eat and cook and drink, and so that we can economize and still remain healthy. So the phytochemicals now fall into 5 groups. Okay? And as you know, part of the ECCB's current mission speaks to a colorful rainbow. And so it's very apt that I would be allowed to present this evening. And of course, our foods are categorized into 5 different colors. We're encouraged to eat 5 cups every day. So, my question to you is, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of these colors you've had for the week? Or how many of these colors you've had today? Okay? So it's a charge to you that when you go shopping next time, when you prepare your foods, when you put it on the plate, that you keep your nutrition with color in mind. And this infographic here, there is an app. It's called the Colors of Health. You can look for it in your app store. You can download it, or you can search for it on the internet to get some more information. Of course, from a nutritional standpoint, foods such as potato, yam, edo, they are not vegetables, by the way. They contain chiefly carbohydrates. So if you see that, it's not that we don't know what we're saying, but there are different categorizations based on international jurisdiction. So now we're going to talk about the colors of the rainbow. All right? So real quickly, you can see the various colors and their health benefits, or what phytochemicals they contain, and the health benefits I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So the benefits of phytonutrients are very extensive. Visual health, like lutein, which you find in the green vegetables. Then immunity, which all the vegetables and fruits will give you because of the vitamin C content and other phytochemicals that will contribute to greater immunity. Then the cancer fighting properties, blood pressure fighting properties. And when we say blood pressure, we all have blood pressure, don't we all? So in terms of hypertension itself, or elevated blood pressure, these phytochemicals have the ability to fight hypertension and elevated blood pressure. Then also the properties for heart health. Heart health is very important because when the heart stops beating, that's a death sentence right there. So we have to preserve our hearts, not just through eating, but also stress management. Now we're going to talk about some food items, and I would like you to reflect on these and ask yourself, when was the last time you've tasted one of these delicious superfruits. So soursop, pomegranate, guava. You know what that purple one is? Jamun. And what about the West Indian cherry? Everybody's claiming rights now with the West Indian cherry. Barbados, Antigua. You know, you can't say West Indian cherry anymore if you're in a particular country. But what happens is that small fruit, you see how small it is? It has 30 times more vitamin C than the same weight of a citrus fruit. 30 times more vitamin C than a lime, than an orange, than a citrus fruit. And what happens? The birds and the ants and the bats and the rats are eating them, and we leave our backyard and go to the supermarket and buy something in a bottle to help solve a problem. So it is important that we are aware of these challenges and what we may be doing behaviorally that can help to promote our health if we change these behaviors as well as our pocket. What about these vegetables? These are powerful cancer fighters. Most of them are from the brassica family. When last have you tasted one of these lovely ones? Okay, so this is a charge and a challenge again to us to incorporate more of these into our diet. And then we have the therapeutic fats and oils, such as coconut. Do you remember the time when coconut was coined as something really bad? And the coconut industry went down and people stopped eating coconut? But the rest of us kept on putting the coconut milk in our Sunday rice and peas? Kudos to you. Congratulations for not listening to conspiracy theory. Because coconut, dried coconut, which contains a therapeutic fat, is very healthy for us. Yes, it does contain saturated fat, but research is showing, and our grandparents knew this long ago before the research, that it is very beneficial to fight many diseases, even cancers. They're doing research with dried coconut and Alzheimer's and many different other disorders. And then when we talk about our spices, herbs and spices, we know that when we incorporate them into our foods that we spoke about earlier, they have therapeutic properties. So let's talk about select supplements for common disorders. And as you can see real quick here, the possibilities are endless. But when we talk about yeast overgrowth, gut health, that's the main issue that we see clinically, because our health, overall health, is linked to our gut health, right? Even our psychological health. If we don't have a healthy gut, psychologically, we are not where we should be. And I'm not talking about certified lunacy per se. I am talking about many other issues that stem from our gut. But let's talk about the oil of oregano. The oil of oregano is so beneficial. How many of you use that? Have you ever heard of it? Have you used it? Do you have it in your house? Yes, everybody from now on should keep a bottle in your house. Okay, even if it's contraindicated in a disorder such as diabetes, as you can see at the end of the slide, is contraindicated in diabetes and those taking blood thinning meds, but it is excellent to treat nail fungus. It's an excellent mouthwash. It could be used as a sinus rinse. Of course, please do not go home and try it before understanding how to use it, because it's quite caustic. It burns, right? It burns. You don't want to make a mistake and touch it and touch your eyes, all right? But it is so beneficial. Everybody in my house gets a little shot, okay? And it really helps to build your immunity. And where does it come from? It comes from the oregano that we use to prepare our meals, right? It is prepared using the shoots and the leaves via air drying and distillation. Mrs. Jenkins spoke to some of the preparations. Now, to close off, we're going to talk about the silver economy. And we really want to promote the support systems for local farming and agro-processing. We do have persons who are into agro-processing, and they're, you know, producing teas and other preparations that we can use at home, even skin products as well. And COVID was a blessing in disguise. Some persons were able to find their inner creativity, or even if they knew they had it, they were able to find the time to do the things that they were so passionate and dreamt about, and it became a reality using some of our natural resources, especially like the coconut and other herbs and spices and plants. We want to promote sustainability of our natural resources. And that's where home gardening comes in. That's where the wasteland that we have, if you know that even if we have the wasteland, even if there's a little bit of grass growing on that wasteland, it's more beneficial to that soil. Do you know that? If you have soil and there's nothing growing in that soil and it's just there like cracked pavement, it's not healthy for the soil, it's not healthy for the surrounding lands, and it's not healthy for our economy. So wasteland needs to be populated with even wild grass. And then we need to promote buying and eating locally. And there's a movement called the ugly fruit movement. What does it mean? Because sometimes as consumers, we want to purchase only the things that look attractive, right? So the people who have the fruits and vegetables in the market, it doesn't look so attractive to us. It doesn't look as bright and colorful as the ones imported. So what persons do sometimes is go and purchase those that are imported, and it does not necessarily equate to healthier. Okay, so let us join the ugly fruit movement and purchase what's local, eat what's local, okay? We get more nutrition from those, especially because we know where it's coming from. Health promotion and education is very important, especially the behavioral aspect again. So we can preach and preach, but if persons do not have a desire to eat healthily, then we still have an issue. So our job now is to help persons to undo the behaviors that are not beneficial to them and to have that desire to be healthy. Embracing the growth of functional integrative health and health practitioners. And so I hope to see more physicians prescribing nutritional supplements or herbal supplements. I have seen some physicians doing that, and I must congratulate especially two physicians in Antigua and Barbuda who helped me to get back on a journey of health. The prescribed meds was not helping at all, and it was a herbal supplement that they recommended, and I was able to see the results of that. So I hope to see more practitioners and especially physicians prescribing herbal supplements. And the continued protection of indigenous intellectual property and fair remuneration in exchange of traditional knowledge. What happens is that persons travel to the villages, speak to the indigenous people, get the knowledge from them, the same knowledge we are throwing away and saying that grandma doesn't know what they're talking about, grandpa doesn't know what he's talking about. And you know what they do? They run clinical trials with that information. They develop herbs, multi-million, multi-billion dollar industry. And guess what? Granny's still praying to God to patch the roof so that the rain doesn't wet her. And they have taken her knowledge and made money out of it. And so the Nagoya Protocol is there to protect this intellectual knowledge. The access and fair and equitable benefit sharing. That's really important. We have to help grandma too. We have to help grandma. Because what we have here in terms of our indigenous herbal medicine, medicinal plants, it is of value to us and our economy. So, when we talk about medicine, pharmacy, and nutrition, what do we all have in common? The metabolites, in one form or the other. So don't be afraid to start the conversation or keep the conversation going if you have already started it. Thank you for listening, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our final panelist. Lots of runs were scored. Lots of runs were scored by these three panelists. They cleared the innings, and it's time for your questions. By the way, so the ugly fruit movement, we heard from our nutritionist, Dr. Dorothy Graham Charles, and also that matter of intellectual property, hugely important, about the fact that we can benefit from this as well. Hugely significant. All right, time for your questions now. So we'll take questions from both our online audience, our radio audience, and our audience here. So, but we of course, give preference to our audience here. So let's get the questions going. So the microphone is right there in the middle. You can just, no need to rush to the microphone, one at a time. Kyron, you can go ahead if you want. That's fine. Okay. Actually, Kieran, the lady behind you, let her go first. There's ladies before gentlemen, and then you right after. So our first question is coming up, and then of course we'll try to alternate between questions from our audience and questions online. Yes, please go ahead, please.
Seriously concerns me, and I'm wondering, I hope I'm not touching the wrong toes, but that has often bothered me, that you go that one time and they say the pressure is high, and then you have this prescription every month to keep taking these. How do we address that? Okay, so that was one versus the traditional and the other. May I ask all one time and then quit? Is that okay?
It all
You
sounds
can
like about
respond?
5? Or yes. Okay.
Is to see that patient on 3 separate occasions. So you have to see the patient on 3 separate occasions, hopefully in 3 separate settings, and if we can accommodate you at 3 different times of day. And so therefore there is no doctor that's going to see you today and prescribe an antihypertensive, unless of course you have severe hypertension and you are having an hypertensive episode, which if we do not medicate you today, you would go home and your life would be endangered. So there are also some nuances about treating hypertension that maybe, and I have to take the blame for that, in terms of the medical fraternity, we don't take the time to explain to our clients that once you have 2 figures in your blood pressure, once your top and your bottom figure are alarmingly high, then we can tell you right off the bat that's not a today story. So if both figures are alarmingly high, the bottom figure takes 3 to 6 months to raise 10 millimeters of mercury. So if you go from 80 to 90, you're looking at 3 to 6 months of high blood pressure. If you're going from 90 to 100, you're looking at over a year. And so therefore, it's not fair to say that we saw you the one time. What we're seeing is a pattern that you have been establishing for over a year. Okay. So that's the first thing. I do note your concern because I have the same concern. So I go to my colleagues, and I really, like everybody else, I'm human and don't want to be told that I have to take medication forever. So I would ask Dr. Stevens, I can come back next week and you measure it again? Just to see if, there's can I do some home remedies and come back to you and see? And certainly these occasions are allowed in the clinic setting, but it is not accurate to say that she came that day and it's the stress alone that caused her pressure.
I bow to that.
Okay.
Just asking the thought pattern. And,
Okay, thank you.
I sincerely appreciate your answer. To the pharmacist, you know, I heard you use the term prescribing the familiar options, which I'm very grateful for. But then sometimes there is this clash factor of before I'm accustomed to take the ginger and stuff like that, but now that I'm taking the modern medicine and I can't mix it, right? Not the knowledge of not knowing. I don't know how is the best way to always put forward to our silver economists that, you know, you can't drink a ginger beer anymore if you're now taking such a like. How do we bring out that information out? So I'll hold that. And then my last one is to the nutritionist with the oregano. Is there a strength between the oil versus the leaves versus the fresh plant? And if I may just throw in to Honorable Joseph, can we harvest all that fever grass on the hill rather than burning them and bring them down for those of us who can't climb the hill? So thank you very much.
Okay, so just to clarify, I'm not quite sure I got your question. It is, how do we get our silver economy population to accept that they are not able to use both the traditional and the modern at the same time?
Well, yes, so sometimes I know from both my parents, my mother and my mother-in-law, one is now taking traditional medicine, but before she will be taking the other things. And the other one is refusing to take the medicine, like taking her own one. So I'm just saying, how do we get them to?
Okay, so the first thing is that our senior, I don't like to say older, our senior population tends to be set in their ways, right? It depends on what disease conditions that you're treating. It is not automatic that you can't do both, and it's not automatic that you can do both. Because if you remember what I said about the interactions, some interactions are actually beneficial and some are not, right? And so you need to have that conversation with your senior person as to and their healthcare provider, because sometimes they go into the visit and they don't disclose, right? And if you can get in touch with your healthcare provider and you can disclose that information, maybe as a team, you can work with the senior population and help them to figure out what is the best way moving forward.
To answer your question in terms of the potency of the oil of oregano, whether it is the fresh plant compared to maybe the dry herb used in cooking and the oil itself. So the oil would be more potent. Why? Because the fresh plant would have more water in it, as well as it would have the roughage. The dried the dried oregano, it won't have that water activity going on there, but it will have some roughage. So the oil now, what it has is mainly the phytochemicals contained in it. So it will be more potent. But what we need to understand is we don't necessarily have to use the most potent source. We can use consistently the oregano along with other spices in our cooking. So we want to eat widely. We want to eat a variety of the food groups so that we're not just focusing on the nutrients in one food item. What happens is then it builds up toxicity, and we're not being able to benefit from the nutritional components of the other foods when we just focus on one food item.
Yes. Oh, I think the mic was. Okay, sure. Yes, Minister, you want to respond to that?
Well, certainly we have an abundance of it in Antigua and Barbuda, and I personally have a lot on a piece of land I have right now. I want to react to this whole presentation and commend the presenters. I think they were absolutely brilliant. And I want to congratulate the University of the West Indies presence here this afternoon because I have an idea that I would wish to discuss. And of course, to recognize the importance of the ECCB being a partner in this whole thing. It's good that we have this knowledge, but we now have to look at what capacity we have within the Caribbean, especially the OECS, to maximize the benefits of this knowledge. And from the presentations, and especially with the involvement of the medical benefit scheme, we have spent in 2019, we spent approximately $27 million in buying medicines for the contributors of medical benefits. Sounds to me like there is something called a silver economy lurking somewhere there. And the issue is, how can we harness the capacities, even starting here in Antigua and Barbuda, because we have the benefit of medical benefits with a captive number of people who are getting this medicine. Could we have a research where we have some of the beneficiaries with their consent who will take the traditional medicine that is deemed to be effective and safe, and then you have another group that will use the prescribed medicine or the ones that are considered more, modern medicine, and to see the outcome. And I will tell you, if we get the University of the West Indies, ECCB, medical benefits, and we harness all those resources and probably some others we consider, then we can really make good of this knowledge that we have before us. We must get to the point that we have to demonstrate some progress in harnessing all this knowledge that we are hearing and we know exists from our forebears. And so maybe one of the outcomes, and I'd really like as the minister to sit with a group to see how we can structure this. It cannot be that we have all this knowledge and the evidence is there. It has worked for my grandparents and your grandparents, I'm sure. And then we have this wonderful setting and with all this beautiful information, and then nothing comes out of it. So that is my interest in what and the experience I've had this evening.
So it sounds like we're going to hold you to that in terms of getting this discussion going. In terms of from online, a question from Denise Walters Williams. This question is, can the purple flower be used to make tea? If not, how can it be used naturally? The purple flower. You want to take, was it the periwinkle? Which one? Periwinkle, right. So you want to take that, pharmacist?
Before I hand over to Mrs. Jenkins, I'd just like to point out that by no means do any of these traditional medicine remedies have official doses at this time. And official dosing at this time. And this also transfers to other industries which we may be entertaining to start in Antigua, where it is good to have the knowledge that the periwinkle is used to make vincristine and vinblastine, but there's a very thin line between applicability and toxicity. And therefore, if we knew that it would take, 5 petals or 2 petals or something like that, then we wouldn't need to have dosing and so on. And you have to be very careful when you embark upon using very, very potent natural remedies, which have a high potency level and also a high efficacy level. So this is the flip coin of natural medicine, is that for everything that has great efficacy in treating disease and great potency, you have to also be aware of the dosage, for there is also a lurking toxicity level. So there is no way that we could tell you how many periwinkles, what size is that periwinkle, how many grams of it, has it been standardized, and is the periwinkle that is grown in the Antiguan soil, is it as potent as the one that is grown in the African coast? As you know, the minister is nodding, because we have these same issues with another industry that we are about to embark upon, where we have to dose what is grown in Antigua in order for us to have the best benefit without toxicity.
In addition to what Dr. Miller said, let me also draw to your attention that there's the pink or purple periwinkle, and there's also a white periwinkle. And in the southern islands, like St. Lucia and so on, we tend to use the white periwinkle for treating ailments. But you have to be, like I said, you need to have an understanding of which plant you're identifying. And so that's why I also referenced the plants of St. Lucia, the Kabi link, and the tramel.net link as well, which shows you the different plants, and it helps you to be able to identify the parts of the plant that can be used and so on. So if you do want, we can always extend the links to you, and you can get a look as well.
Thank you so much. Just very quickly to another one on, and then we're going to come back to the telephone. The microphone in the audience here. Facebook question from Judy Payne, and this is one specifically, I think this can go to all. As health practitioners, how do we strike that balance between modern medicine and traditional medicine, and how do we counsel patients on striking that balance? There's another question, this time from YouTube. Carlton Peckering says, I would like to see our doctors engage in sharing information on using traditional medicine along with prescription in the mixed. So I suppose he's saying the doctors should try to mix them better. But specifically about, we're going to come to you, Doc, but it's specifically about marijuana, medicinal marijuana. This one will be this will be music to the ears of Ambassador Joseph. What are we looking at in terms of the dosing? Where are we with that here in Antigua?
I'm not privy to what is going on in the medical marijuana dosing at this time. I think that medical practitioners are being trained on how to prescribe standardized doses, and we are not privy to what is the advancement in the market in Antigua at this time. So I'm not sure what has been happening, but regionally, not just in Antigua, but in Barbados and in Jamaica, there have been several training sessions that not just myself, but other colleagues from Antigua, I have seen them all over the region training up to the opportunity to use standardized doses in treatment of not just glaucoma, which we know we use cannabinoids for, but also in the seizure control, chronic pain, and also in a myriad of gastrointestinal diseases, and there are many, many applications. However, in terms of specifically speaking to Antigua, I don't think that the doctors are privy to what's going on. I think we're just all doing what all the doctors in the region ought to be doing, which is training up in a standardized way. I've been to Canada and I've seen colleagues there training. I attended a training course in Jamaica and I saw quite a few colleagues there. The same regional trainers have been trained in Canada and they visited Antigua. It was well attended. People have been certified here as providers, and so therefore we are preparing ourselves in a scientific and meticulous manner.
Just a very quick question, just a follow-up. Thanks, Dr. Miller. Follow-up in terms of the YouTuber who is asking, I would like to see, or was saying, I would like to see our doctors engage and sharing information on using traditional medicine along with the prescription in the mixed. So both the nutritionist and to the pharmacist.
Okay, first let's remember that depending on your disease condition, you may or may not be able to use the combination of the two. And that's the very first thing that we need to understand. And of course, secondly, if we, like I said, our medical practitioners as well as ourselves, we need to work on educating ourselves as to what is available in the region, what our traditional uses are, and how we can work on it. So that's the only way we can strike a balance. If we start the conversation, we educate ourselves, and if we are open when we're having this conversation and disclose whatever it is that we're using at the time and not hiding, then we can talk about creating a plan to go forward.
Mrs. Jenkins has so ably answered the question in terms of disclosure. And many times what we find is the patient goes to the doctor or the health care provider and they compartmentalize what information they want to share. And so it's very important. So for example, if they're going to 3 different physicians, 3 different specialists, they decide they're going to tell them just about one condition, one drug that they're taking, and then there can be interactions that are deadly to this patient. So they have to disclose even to the nutritionist. I think it's evolving now that they're understanding the role of the nutritionist and that we have studied nutrition science, and it's not just about fruits and vegetables, but about the drugs that they're taking, the contraindications to disease states, the interactions, and even coenzymes that they may be consuming that will have more beneficial properties to their lifestyle. So it's important for persons to make that disclosure quite openly.
Okay, I'd like to add on the tail of what my colleague has said. There are some simple things like disclosing that you're taking a drug called warfarin, because that would then, you wouldn't be able to have green leafy vegetables. And there are simple interactions that if you do not inform us, we're not able to best inform you of natural foods and diet changes that would help you along your way.
Yes, indeed. Okay, we're going to get Kieran and then Bishop Johnson. You want to yield? Okay, he yields to you, Bishop. Yes. He says, as a man of the cloth, he yields to you. Okay.
Yes.
He says he
Thank
wants a special prayer in return.
Yes, thank you so much. Philbert Johnson from the Evangelical Alliance and from the New Testament Church of God. I'm very happy that you have emphasized the matter of the traditional medicine. My wife is a medical doctor, and we have, lived together for the last 25 years. And we have been having this conversation that I don't believe we give enough credit to our own people. And I'm going to give you the example. Well, most of my life has been in Jamaica, and I'm here. I told my wife, and we have had this conversation where they keep, downplaying the role of our elders that they have played. I don't even want to use the word traditional. It's the same medicine, just that they are being scientific about it now. It's not anything new. The ingredients that are in there, that they're making a lot of money, it is the same ingredients, but they are just being scientific about it. That's it, because we have not written much in the Caribbean. We don't get enough credit, and we don't make enough from it. And hear what I say to my wife, and I'm happy about this discussion today. Sweetheart, my great-grandmother lived to 107, running all over. And if it's for her alone, doctors would die of hunger. You would die of hunger. Because they don't know no hospital, none of those things. So I'm really very happy that we're really giving credit. They know the dosage. They have done it. But it's just that they have not documented it because they are oral people. They are oral people. And I said, if they have done it all these years, and my great-grandmother lived to 107, her children, most of them live into the 70s and the 80s. And my great-grandaunt that died the other day in Jamaica lived to 92. So they have been doing something right. And I believe we need to explore this some more, document it, give our people more credit. I believe we need to do that.
Here. Please, sure. I think for that, Yes, that is true. Yes, what we'll do, we'll get some more questions in, and then we'll have everybody respond to. So we're going to respond to Bishop Johnson, and then so we'll get. If you can give me about probably another 5 more minutes. 10? Okay, sure. Okay, we've gotten 10 minutes. So, Kieran, go ahead, please.
I'll just give you the one question. Are you concerned about persons who are offering advice on traditional medicines, but may genuinely be overselling their utility or value? Because I'm sure many people have had run-ins with someone who may say, you know, hey, look, do these things, take these products, and it's going to have these wonderful effects, but they're actually just trying to sell you a product. So, you know, obviously you'll have some persons who won't do that. They will be genuine and tell you, this is what it does, and this is the extent to which you can rely on it. But then you have others who will be trying to sell you, you know.
The classic snake oil businessman, right? Snake. Absolutely. Okay, so you want to respond to, okay, we can take one more question and then we just respond to all 3 questions. I have one more question from the audience first. Yes, go ahead, please, Robert. Robert Emmanuel.
So I'm going to just generally ask my question. What I've heard so far has been...
Just come a little closer, please, Robert, to the mic.
A little
please.
closer? This better?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So what I've heard so far from Minister Joseph, and one of the standing points that have been talked about by all the panelists, is the need for education. Hopefully I'm correct on that point. So my question is in relation to, is there a thought that we should have some sort of academic course, or maybe at UE or at the State College, that focuses on traditional medicine, that focuses on the usage and the pros and the cons, and perhaps get our young youth involved in that sort of field so they have an understanding about traditional medicine. And so, as my friend whose name I would forget talked about, perhaps even have more documentation about the use of traditional medicines that our elders have in their heads, that our youth can then take and put on paper. So,
okay, perfect. So I'll have the panelists respond to all 3 questions. Bishop Johnson, Kieran, and Roberto Mann.
Thank you. I don't think that Bishop Johnson needs a response except to say that you said it all and you said it correctly. I think that the only comment I could make, Bishop, is that in our world today and generally, as life progresses, we need to do research and we need to do standardization and documentation. And so this is the stage we are at. The one, we're acknowledging the fact that these medicinal remedies are traditional, they're helpful, they can reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases. So we can't jump off next week and start writing garlic prescriptions. We are going to have to standardize research and also come to some kind of standardization and documentation. So that's my comment for you, and thank you for a well aptly said comment. For Mr. Kieran, I would like to say that if there is someone who is promoting, I would pass along for my colleagues to make their comments on each person, if that's okay. So Mr. Kieran, just quickly, I would like to say if there is a doctor that is selling their way only, you have to be wary of that person. So I would not pick on the people who are pushing traditional medicine only. I will pick on my own colleagues and myself. So if I said to you, the only way to heal from hypertension is to take this prescription and never stop taking it, then you should be wary of me. Because there has to be some kind of interplay and teamwork. So if you are selling traditional medicines, of course they do work, and there will always be people who oversell their own market. But as consumers, we also have the right and also owe ourselves a debt of knowledge and not going blindly into a field. So I know that sometimes it's easier to think that there is an easy way out of non-communicable diseases. It is a multifactorial team effort that we all need to buy into in terms of our efforts. Okay? I think I'm going to leave the last question to my 2 colleagues because I think it speaks to the same need for research, documentation, and education. Okay?
Okay, just towards the end of my presentation, I did lay a charge to everyone to try to interact with your senior population, even within your household, and to document the information that they have and tap into that little bit of resources, that knowledge, and document it. Because, of course, we are lacking in our documentation. That is not to say that there aren't movements that are documenting. Tramil did about 55 territories documenting plants and their traditional uses, not only in the Caribbean, in Belize, and around the wider basin. And they have that available online. To touch your question on the courses, there are programs in botany, in complementary and alternative medicine that exist, right? So it's just a matter of talking to the right people and trying to find the guidance to know what direction to look into. But the programs do exist. Maybe the project would be to document for your region, but the movement has already begun. And of course, I think Dr. Miller already handled Kieran's question very well, so I would not be touching on that.
All the questions have been quite ably answered in terms of courses. There are many courses that persons can tap into online. That is number one. And as I mentioned, more healthcare providers are going into functional, what we call functional nutrition, functional medicine, functional pharmacy. And there are endless resources that are available that persons can retrieve and that they can read that information. But of course, the School of Pharmacy is here in Antigua and Barbuda at Antigua State College. And a lot of that information is taught in the School of Pharmacy. And I want to encourage persons who are looking for a healthcare field to go into pharmacy can be considered because they'll learn a wealth of information from just attending that pharmacy course.
Thank you so much. We're going to get Minister Joseph to comment. We're going to get also Ambassador Darwin Joseph as well. And the distinguished principal of the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus will comment on the research and development issue and how can we document. Research and development is so crucial, but we don't do it enough in the Caribbean. We're going to get to those issues shortly. Any additional questions? Or we want, sure, please go ahead, Dr. Joseph. A lot of Josephs, man. Dr. Joseph, Sir Malloy Joseph, Ambassador Joseph, man, a lot of Josephs. Okay, so this is Dr. Terry Ann Joseph, Deputy Chief Medical Officer.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to thank the ECCB for hosting this very important lecture. Very interesting topic, and I want to thank my colleagues for making such excellent presentations. I'm hearing a lot about education. I'm hearing a lot about disclosure. But as healthcare providers, we know that disclosure doesn't come easily. So I think the onus is on us to start that conversation. What I would hope to see is that at every contact point that a client goes to, that conversation is started or generated. So for example, let's take specifically at the pharmaceutical level. Perhaps instead of saying, take one tablet 2 times a day until finished, or until you have to come back for your next prescription, how about the counseling of the patient, the client at that time? Taking the time to sit and have the conversation, because that actually is a part of providing the service. What are you eating? What are you drinking? These are the things that you can incorporate into your diet. Based on what I'm seeing here, these are the things that you should not eat. These are the things that you should eat. And perhaps at that time, say to that person, okay, I think it would be good for you to actually see a nutritionist as well. And it's to have this conversation. I'd like to hasten to say that we have, qualified nutritionists in the public health system who are there at the community clinics and would love to have this conversation. So in essence, what I really would like to see more is a team approach. So when you have the first contact with the physician, it just doesn't stay there. That physician, refers you to a nutritionist so you can have that interaction. And of course, a lot of times we underestimate the role of the pharmacist. And perhaps they have reduced themselves to be just seen as people who count tablets and give them, perhaps. but there is a role for the pharmacist to engage the clients and have this conversation. So thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. We could probably take one more question from the audience, and then we'll have our audience, we'll have our panelists respond, and then we'll have the three gentlemen I mentioned, Sir Malwin, Ambassador Joseph, and Professor Williams. I'm going to come to you shortly, but pondering this before I go to the panel, this is the last question, and this one gets a gold star. We're talking about the silver economy. This one gets a gold star from our online audience. Facebook question from Cosell Fraser, who says, who asks, what is required to build out the research and development capacity at the regional level to manufacture our own traditional medicines? We're going to get to that. So that's one of the questions that I want to ask Professor Williams about. That is perhaps the question of the night. Certainly on the question of the night. So let's get the panelists to respond to, for example, Dr. Joseph and the other points that were being raised so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for bringing up the multimodal and multi-team approach to patient care. Because there is no patient that is just going to listen to a doctor sitting behind a desk. And we have many points of contact in the health, in the provision of healthcare where we can reach our patients. And sometimes, unfortunate but true, the person that they see the most themselves in are not the doctors. So even though we speak, it doesn't come through as I'm the average person. I also struggle with these diseases. I also have a stressful life. It doesn't come across to them as that. They see, an unbreakable force. But when pharmacists, nurses, even patient care aides, we used to have health talks in our waiting room of our health clinics. These are the places where we need to catch our clients and support them and educate them. But that also begins with us educating ourselves. And that also has to spark some kind of interest. And I thank Dr. Stevens and Dr. Terry and Joseph because the Medical Association has woken up in the last 2 years and has become very vibrant. We interact with each other on such a close level now. In all the years that I've been in Antigua, this has been the most interactive we've been. And there are simple things like I put this out in my group chat, my personal group chat, and Dr. Thwaites reached out and said, remember that I wrote the prescription for the cranberry tablets for you. So it's just that we are now coaching each other and supporting each other to promote not just modern medicine, but traditional medicine. So I agree with Dr. Terrian. Now the question of the night, the gold star question is that is where we're at. That is where we're at. And that's the question that remains unanswered. And that is our springboard from here now. So is it that we can do research on our local items, and what would it take? And is it that we can afford to do regional testing, manufacturing, and what would it take? And those are the questions that we open up when we have a conference such as this. We open up ideas, we open up thoughts, and we open up opportunities. Okay?
Okay, so I will just touch on Dr. Joseph. I think Dr. Miller has done a pretty good job. I agree with you to a certain extent, and I think part of the problem is that we as a society have become so busy and so much in a hurry that even when the pharmacists are available to provide the counseling, that the patient is only interested in picking up the medication and getting out because they have to go back to work, they have to pick up their child, any number of excuses, right? And you are correct. We do need to move back into offering counseling. But like the minister said, we've spent billions on medication for non-communicable diseases. And guess what? That medication has to be filled. And so we have a very, very heavy population or heavy traffic of persons just coming to pick up the prescriptions and not wanting to engage, right? And so it makes it busy, it makes it troublesome. But we do need to look at maybe offering separate counseling services. And I agree, going back to the clinics and doing the talks, that too is very useful. But anytime you come to the pharmacy and you have a question, feel free to ask, because the pharmacist has that responsibility to discuss with you and to try to resolve your issue as comprehensively as possible.
I am so much in agreement with everything that has been said. Thank you for that input, Dr. Joseph. And what I want to encourage persons to do, well, of course, starting the conversation is really important. But writing prescriptions, just not for prescribed drugs or herbal medication, but even prescription for sleep. Get your 8 hours sleep every night, or 30 minutes of walking a day, or spend a few minutes laughing. Prescriptions for those have been written. The prescription that goes to the pharmacy, that part there, been written on that. And so we need to look back at the lifestyle changes that we need to make. That foundation I spoke about earlier, because a lot of the health issues we are facing today are stemming from lifestyle issues that are unaddressed, and we're just treating the symptom, not the root cause. So I just wanted to make that plug.
Thank you so much, panelists. We're pretty much pressed for time. I really want to get very quickly in so that we can get Ambassador Joseph, Sir Malwin, and Professor Williams before we cut off on the stream. I want the online audience and the radio audience to hear what you're saying. So if you could make your presentation as quickly as possible, please, so that we can get them in on the street before we cut off. Let me start with Minister and then Ambassador.
On this 40th anniversary of ECCB, I'm hoping that we could come out with some tangible direction in addressing the opportunities that are before us. Antigua and Barbuda is the only OECS country that has a quasi-insurance, which is the medical benefits. We spend all this money on medication. We import all of it. We are looking now at the possibility that we can use indigenous plants that will create jobs, create silver economy in Antigua and Barbuda, and stop importing things that we have in our backyard. So if we were to get the institutions, government, or university, unfortunately we have the Cuban government with a tremendous capacity to do research. I do not see why we could not let this day be the beginning of a new direction where we can create the opportunities in our country and get our best minds to begin to do the things that other people are doing for us.
Well said, Minister. Well said. Let me first of all congratulate the ECCB, of course, for this very important and very instructive presentation today. Congratulate the panel, very informative, learned a lot. One of the things that I think is very critical to planning forward is the whole issue of regional coordination of effort. Because what we're up against with regards to monetizing our traditional medicine is a corporate structure in developed countries that are hell-bent to ensure that their profit margin on their medicine remain top and make sure that our traditional medicines are always relegated. We saw it with the coconut reference that you made, and that is very important. As far as the cannabinoids are concerned and medicinal cannabis, we must not underestimate that currently it's a $25 billion industry worldwide, projected to be upwards of around 40 billion within the next 5 years. And I certainly believe that the Caribbean, with our university network, have a critical role to play to ensure that these countries realize the type of benefits that are possible from medicinal cannabis. Most people look at it as just the flower to be consumed by way of smoking or or by teas and so forth. But there are so many known applications for medicinal cannabis that revealing themselves day after day after day. When you do your search with regards to what the universities are doing now, especially in the United States, you're seeing products very frequently being patented coming off of the medicinal cannabis line. And we're losing time with this. And I seriously believe that one of the reasons why the federal government of the United States have not yet decriminalized and moved quickly into the use of cannabis as a medicine is because their structure is not prepared for it as yet. The Food and Drug Administration is not prepared, and many other structures are not prepared. So they're setting the groundwork so that they can dominate this space. And we have to short circuit that and set our groundwork so that we can control the space not only within our territories, but a springboard to launch it and make it profitable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ambassador Davin Joseph, who is Development Commissioner. Let me just, yes, okay. Professor Williams has graciously
Thank you.
accepted to use the microphone.
I know you're running against time, but I just wanted to make...
Professor, may us repeat the question, just for those who would have missed it, the specific one that you will be responding to. What is required to build out the research and development capacity at the regional level to manufacture our own traditional medicine? Take a bow, Facebook questioner, Joselle Fraser, the question of the night. Over to you,
Right, thank
Professor.
you. So I really wanted to make a few points, but first let me congratulate the presenters for a really insightful set of presentations. But I didn't know you were going to call on Sir Malwin and Ambassador Joseph, because almost all the things that they said are the things I was going to say. Really and truly what you need to do in order to monetize this industry is to firstly formalize it. The problem is that we're too informal with these kinds of things. So what we do, everybody does their little own thing, and they try to bring it together. And exactly what Ambassador said, you have a corporate structure which you're fighting against, and you can't fight against it with an informal structure. So you have to formalize it. So in order for us to build out this infrastructure around the traditional medicine, we really have to get all the players to the table. And we have to speak. So we have to get the policymakers, we have to get the capital, and we have to get the researchers. And we come to the table, we formalize our approach, and we make things happen. And the final thing I will say, unfortunately, we think that there is not a proper research network that is there. The University of the West Indies is far advanced in doing this kind of work. We have, for example, at the Ramona campus, the Natural Product Institute, and somebody put up a slide of Sylvia Mitchell, for example, deeply ingrained in this kind of work. We have the Natural Product Institute that is doing a plethora of work in this kind of area as well. But what we need is a coming together of all the parties. So we have the knowledge there, but we don't have the capital. And then we now need the policymakers to support us to deal with the kind of corporate structure that the big multinationals are having, and use our policy framework so that we can get into those value chain. And then we have the capital, we'll go behind it, and the university is there already doing the work. So if we put everybody together at the table, then we can get greater benefit from it. So that's really what we need to move away from here with tonight. Yes?
So Professor, thank you so much, Professor. Congratulations to you on that. So let me just ask you finally, this is the takeaway of the night. You're saying the University of the West Indies is eager, chomping at the bits, ready to work on this as soon as everybody else comes together.
We are already working on
Good.
it. So what we want are the partners at the table so we can move it further.
Good.
I'm saying the structure, the professor is correct. You must work with the structure. You need government policy. So we need to bring everybody to the table. And usually it's the government that will lead with the policy, the legislation. All these things are going to be required. There is not a lack of capacity. There is a matter of getting together. And I'm excited that on this 40th anniversary, it is the beginning of that process where we can reduce the import of all these medicines in the Caribbean, and certainly in Antigua, when we're spending $25 million a year with about 30,000 people consistently getting medication for medical benefits. So we can do it here, and we should consider this as the beginning. This is the takeaway. Thank you.
Smallwood, a round of applause for Smallwood, please. That is obviously the takeaway for the night, and I see several light bulbs going off in Smallwood's head, and Ambassador Davin Joseph and Professor Williams, our panelists, the ECCB, the great former ECCB Deputy Governor, Trevor Brathwaite, thank you so much. The great Woodfield Harris, former, essentially transitioning from Financial Secretary. All, you said, Sir Malwin, the capacity is not lacking. What is lacking is the coordination. All the stars need to align for this to happen. And I think that our panelists have given us the basis, the foundation, the platform on which to build on. The university has already been doing the work. The University of the West Indies. The University of the West Indies needs now support. All the players to come to the table to get this done. What a fantastic day this is. Perhaps this is the beginning of a great new future, a brave new world, when we can use traditional medicines in this region to tap into a $15 trillion industry of the silver economy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. You've been a fantastic audience. I want to leave you with two quotes which are apropos for this discussion. And as we leave, Chuck Norris, the great, said the key to the future in an aging society is not found in increasing just our lifespan. We need to increase our health span at the same time. And Celine Dion, so I'm using people from the orange economy, there is no such thing as aging, but maturing and knowledge. It's beautiful. I call that beauty. Celine Dion is absolutely right. So aging can be, the silver economy can be a fantastic opportunity for us to increase the health of our physical health, our financial health. Great way to get all the stars aligned. Really appreciate it. The next lecture in this series, the ECCB at 40, a year of celebration and implementation, will go to St. Lucia. St. Lucia gets the baton from Antigua and Barbuda in April, and they will be discussing another color, another element of the economy. They'll be discussing essentially reimagining or pioneering the modern St. Lucia, a look at the green and golden economy. The green and golden economy will be the center of discussion in St. Lucia in April. We look forward to that. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the audience here. You've been fantastic and attentive. It seems as if whatever the bush or the tea or whatever the bark, that was the bark that gave you the attentive span. You made sure that you were paying attention. Thank you so much. And to our audience on radio and online, we really appreciate it. Bye-bye for now. Let me a special thanks to Carol Ford Harrigan, country manager in Antigua, and Mary Benjamin Prime, her able assistant, who did a fantastic job. They just don't have the capes, but they were superwomen to get this done. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great night, everybody.
The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, celebrates 40 years of transformative leadership and innovation. The ECCB has been diligently fulfilling its mission of advancing the good of the people of the currency union for 40 years by maintaining monetary and financial stability and promoting growth and development. It is the monetary authority for a population of more than 600,000 people spanning 6 sovereign states: Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, St. Christopher, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and 2 overseas territories of the United Kingdom, Anguilla and Montserrat. On October 1st, 1983, the East Caribbean Currency Authority, ECCA, was upgraded to a central bank, the ECCB. The ECCB's predecessor, the ECCA, had been established in 1965 to issue and manage EC currency after its predecessor, the British Caribbean Currency Board, dissolved in 1964 when Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago withdrew membership to form their own central banks. Shortly after Barbados signaled its intention to withdraw from the ECCA and establish its own central bank, the West Indies Associated States Council of Ministers decided to move the headquarters of the East Caribbean Currency Authority to St. Kitts. 1 year after Barbados's withdrawal, ECCA's headquarters transferred to St. Kitts on May 20th, 1975, situated at the corner of Central and Church Streets. The move to St. Kitts was overseen by the Managing Director of the ECCA, Sir Cecil Jacobs, a national of St. Kitts and Nevis. The next year, on July 7, 1976, the EC dollar was pegged to the US dollar at a fixed rate of EC $2.70 to US $1. Nearly 7 years later to the day, on July 5, 1983, 7 governments signed the agreement establishing the ECCB as the monetary authority, with Anguilla eventually signing on as a full member on April 1, 1987. On October 1, 1983, the ECCB was officially commissioned and operated out of the former ECCA headquarters. 3 months later, the first meeting of the Monetary Council established in accordance with Article 7 of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Agreement was held on January 20th, 1984. Sir Cecil Jacobs, who was then the first governor of the ECCB, led an initial staff of 55 persons. He was ably assisted by Sir Errol Allen, a Vincentian who served as deputy governor until his retirement on March 31st, 2005. The first ECCB agency office was established in Grenada on November 1st, 1984, paving the way for the expansion of the ECCB's footprint to all its member countries. On October 1st, 1987, the ECCB agency office in St. Lucia was established, followed by one in Dominica on November 1st, 1989, and one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on April 1st, 1990, with the remaining ECCB agency offices opening up the next year. Montserrat on March 4th, 1991, then Anguilla on May 23rd, and Antigua and Barbuda on June 15th, 1991. On November 21st, 1992, a ceremony was held to break ground for the construction of the new ECCB headquarters at Bird Rock. The bank moved into its new headquarters in August 1994, and it was officially opened on October 29th that year. Sir Cecil Jacobs retired in September 1989, and Sir K. Dwight Venner, a Vincentian, became governor of the ECCB from December 1st, 1989, and served until his retirement in November 2015. The present governor, Mr. Timothy N.J. Antwine, a Grenadian, assumed the role on February 1st, 2016. The year 2022 was a year of recognition for the ECCB. The ECCB introduced polymer notes in 2019 and won the Best New Banknote Series from Reconnaissance. Come October 1st, the date that the ECCB was put into force 40 years ago, the ECCB headquarters will be entirely carbon neutral. This is thanks to a solar canopy project started in 2017, which was recognized with the Central Banking 2022 Green Initiative Award. Ever in the vanguard of innovation, the ECCB on March 31st, 2021 introduced Dcash, the first central bank digital currency CBDC to be launched by a currency union. As the ECCB enters its 40th year, the governor is adeptly supported by the institution's first female deputy governor, Dr. Valda F. Henry, a national of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Ms. D. Tracy Polius, a national of St. Lucia, who serves as Chief Director Policy. Dr. Henry succeeded Mr. Trevor Brathwaite of St. Lucia, who served as the second deputy governor from 2006 to 2021. There is no way to fit all that the ECCB is, does, and means for the people of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU, into this historical reel. You are therefore invited to log on to the ECCB's virtual museum when it launches later this year to get a full-fledged history of this pioneering central bank. The leadership and the staff of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank proudly celebrate the bank's 40th Ruby anniversary and dedicate this year of festivities to you, the people of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union.